If you're searching for equestrian property, land and ranch property in Northern California right now, you need to stop and watch this video. My name's Alex. I'm with eXp Realty's Land and Ranch Division. I specialize in land and ranch property in Northern California, and there's 5 issues you really need to be aware of if you're out there in the market, certainly before you write an offer on a property. I'm going to jump into them. Let's get into this and discuss them. This is a snapshot of what's going on in the market for land and ranch, 5+ acre equestrian properties in Northern California. Stick around to the end. I'm going to give you a full breakdown with some websites you can go to look at what's sold, what's currently on the market, and you can get deep into the stats. But just on a high level, we're looking at 165 active listings as of the recording of this video. The median average price of those listings is $1,070,000. 70,000. The sold price 848.5. So you can see there's a discrepancy between the two. You've had 187 equestrian properties sell, again 5 acres or more, in the last 6 months. The average marketing time 70 days. So if you're thinking of listing your property, keep this in mind because equestrian properties, they're looking for that specific buyer, completely different than selling a single family home in suburbia. The 98% is the close to list price. So we're seeing that on average, the closing price of the equestrian properties is below what the ask was. So let's talk about zoning. This is one of the biggest hot button issues that you can run into. Um, Exclusive agriculture, generally, you're okay. You're okay. You got to pay attention to the number of large animals you can have per acre. Residential ag, generally, it's okay. In my experience, you really got to pay attention to your neighbors, see what they're doing with their properties. And again, the number of large animals is going to be limited by your acreage. General ag, it varies with lot minimums, so you got to be aware of that. And then timber production, anything timber, specialized timber property, that's a hard no for horses generally. But you got to go in and you got to look at them in advance. You got to look at the designation, again, average lot size, and are there any deed restrictions, HOAs, CC&Rs, this sort of thing. We run into this more in areas that are being um, going from rural into more urban as sprawl takes over. And then you really need to look into what's existing on the property. So let's go to our next one here. So barns, I see this all the time where I go in and I'll see a property that has outbuildings and barns and this sort of thing, and it goes with horse property, but within that space, you have to understand that not all of these outbuildings are necessarily permitted. So when I'm working with a buyer client and even a listed client, what I go in and do is you go to the county and I pull the historical permit records to say, okay, what's been permitted, what's here, and compare that to what's actually here. The reason this is becoming an issue or will become an issue if you're either listing or buying is it affects financing, insurance, and resale. I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, well, it's grandfathered in. It's grandfathered in." Well, it yes, it can exist, but if you really get into the weeds on it, especially with financing is going to go in. They're going to pull the county records. They're going to say, "Okay, what's there? That's what we're going to give value to." The barn could probably still exist, but if it's a significant barn that's adding to the overall value of the property, and now it's not permitted, so now it's not included in the value, obviously that's going to have downstream effects. Insurance as well. If that barn is there but isn't permitted, the insurance isn't necessarily going to cover it. And just because you're able to transact and buy the property, you're still going to have to deal with that problem on the resale. So we jump in, I take a hard look at what's permitted and make sure that we're addressing those the right way. A lot of times we can go in and say, okay, it's permitted, but or it's not permitted. It's there, and if we have a strong buyer that's putting a big down payment, they'll buy it anyway. So water is always a hot button issue. It's something I've addressed in previous videos. Water rights, where you're going to get your water, that sort of thing. Quality of the water is huge, and so when we go in and evaluate, especially horse property, equine property, we're looking at where the water comes from, and for financing purposes, the 5 to 10 gallon per minute minimum is what's required for financing. That can come from private well for the human consumption, if you will, into the property. But you also have irrigation districts and stock ponds. Um, the message I have for you is we go in and make sure that we are verifying the water supply that's being indicated. And as we go through the process, make sure that it is attached to the entitlements of the property, because you don't want to buy a property and then discover after the fact, oh, that water really isn't permitted to the property. This happened recently on a transaction I was involved in, and it was represented that there was a 1 inch irrigation line or allocation of water that was year round, and we closed escrow on it. Then we came back around and had issues because we found out that this particular property had patched into the ditch water line without any sort of permits, no entitlements, nothing. And it was there, it existed, but it wasn't an entitlement that followed the property. So we make sure that we take a look at those issues so that they don't become a downstream issue. Now, with equestrian property, I'll put an emphasis on equestrian property. We're looking at 5 acres. We can see that it's 5 acres, but when you get to the property and really understand what it is, it may not be 5 usable acres. And there's a huge difference in that. If you're in the market looking at property, you know that there's a difference between usable acres and what's there. There's also issues with what is growing on the property. You don't want to buy a property that has the yellow starthistle. It's very toxic to horses. And we're also looking at what the compaction of the soil is, because obviously horses, they're on their feet and they're running around the arena. And so if you have really rocky soil, that's not ideal. We're also looking at shade and shelter, it goes back to the barns and that sort of thing. These are all things that we look at when we go and evaluate equestrian property. Now, the fire risk. This is I think the cherry fire out in Utah right now. I don't know how many square miles this thing has burned, but this is a real issue in rural areas. And so you got to pay attention to what the fire danger is and can you get fire insurance? What does that fire insurance look like? And it goes back to making sure that the improvements on the property are consistent with what is recorded so that insurance can be in place. There are fire-wise communities now to where you have to get a fire-wise certification as a condition of closing escrow, and we go in and obviously we take a look at all of that. Very important. Now, I will say on this barn issue, when we're looking at legacy properties where they've been in the family 20, 30, 40 years, we see a lot of unpermitted structures on those properties. We see a lot of small barns that turn into big barns, and oh, we'll just put this addition on, no one's paying attention. The newer properties that are being developed, we're finding that those don't have as many non-permitted structures on them. And that's a good thing. I think that there's a reason we have building standards. There was just this big earthquake in Venezuela, and you literally you watch buildings crumble in front of you. And I look at it and go, God, would that happen in the U.S.? Are our building standards to the point where those buildings would have withstood, a huge earthquake like that? So same thing with the barns. There's a reason those standards are in place, and they're there to protect us all. All right, so what can you expect to get in the Sac Metro area when it comes to equestrian property acreage, 5 to 10 acres? Entry level, 500,000 to 800,000. These are going to be in areas that aren't quite as desirable. You're going to have older homes, probably going to need some work. Um, if you want to get into that next level where you have a functional property with established pastures, barns, a good well, that sort of thing, you're going to be in that 800 to 1.2 range as of the making of this video, June 30th, 2026. To really get into more of a quality property, a better area where you have arena, multiple stalls, irrigation, you can find that in, like Rio Linda area, Lincoln, Wilton, kind of the outskirts of Sac Metro area. I'd also say up in Shingle Springs, million, 2 to 2 million. Now, the prime properties where you're over 2 million, like I say, I have my listing at 3.65. Those properties are going to be ready to go. Custom barns, indoor, outdoor arena, significant acreage. And you see these in the Loomis Basin area, Granite Bay, areas of Fair Oaks, although some of the Fair Oaks stuff is getting developed right now. And then up the 50 corridor into Shingle Springs area. These properties are nice from a listing standpoint. You're looking for a very specific buyer. If you've gone in and developed your property and you're in that over $2 million market, um, you really have to understand that the property that you have built is very specific to what your needs are. And now you're looking for that ideal buyer client that wants to have that property and has the same sort of ambitions as you. I'm finding that there is a lot of legacy land and ranch properties that the people are getting older. They're getting up there in their 60s, 70s, and they just simply don't have the energy to take care of 5, 10 acre properties with all of the improvements. And it's important to keep up on those from a listing standpoint, because if you fall behind the current trends, then you're looking at saying, okay, I want to sell you my property for $2 million. I know it's not up to date. So after you close escrow on it, you're going to spend 6 to 9 months and a couple $100,000 updating it. So be mindful of the market, the trends, and what you're really asking of the buyer out there from a listing perspective. So just to wrap this up, and I'll give you a worksheet. So if you're out there looking at property and you don't want to necessarily engage with me, I'll give you a worksheet to go through to look at the 5 things you need to look at before you make an offer. Again, we got zoning and what's permitted for livestock, very important. Permit history, it's a thing. You really have to go in there, go to the county, pull those permits, and understand what's there. Quality of the pasture, the fencing, the weeds in the pasture, this sort of thing. You got to make sure that all of that is conducive to how you want to use the property. And then insurance. Insurance is a huge issue in California. It's getting somewhat better, but still it's a huge issue. So I'll put links to I have a couple websites of current land and ranch properties that are on the market. Yeah, these are current active listings right here on the market in our Quad County area. I have access to other data out there, but for the purpose of this video and demonstrating what's going on in the market, these are the current listings. So if you see a land and ranch listing pop on, it's going to be in here, anything over 5 acres. And this is evergreen, so it's constantly updating with MLS. Now, if you're wondering what your neighbor's property sold for, um, I have this list of properties that have sold in the area. So the just sold list is kind of cool because you can go in and say, okay, well, what did my neighbor's house sell for? You can go check it out and see all the details on it. And so I'll put links to both of these pages down in the description of this video. So that's what I have for you today. Like I say, if you're in the market and currently searching for land and ranch, I'll put a worksheet, link to a worksheet from, I think I'll put it in my OneDrive account. And just use it to go through and evaluate properties. If you would like representation for somebody that specializes in land and ranch, as always, reach out to me. I have discussions on a daily basis. I do these videos to let you know that I specialize in land and ranch, and I'm out there really to represent you and protect you from making a bad decision. I have killed more deals through my due diligence um, that some people look at me and go, "Well, if you wouldn't have told them that," I'm like, "Look, you know, this is stuff they need to know." So I'm never going to do that. It's not the way to represent clients, and I pride myself on making sure that when you buy a property, you know all the conditions of it. So if you know anyone out there thinking about buying or selling a land and ranch property, as always, love the referrals coming in. And like I say, go in, like, comment, share, and I'll catch you on the next video.